imperial colonial state. A fifth element or the sixth element of the equation remains, and that is the mullah, the fundamentalist. The fundamentalist was left out in the cold in 1947 when Jinnah gave him a big thrashing in the electoral polls. The fundamentalists, by and large, opposed Pakistan because the mullah said, you can't, Islam is a universal religion, you can't confine it into, within geographically limiting, determined, defined borders. It's universal. So you can't have a state of Islam. Jinnah in 1946 polls beat them up roundly. That was one great good thing about the Pakistan movement. But Jinnah died early. In September 1948, he died within a year of Pakistan's creation. And the mullahs began to resurface. And in first, the objectives resolution, the constitution making started with the objectives resolution, the passage of the objectives resolution, which brought in the Islamic bit. Then the anti-Ahmadiyya movement. In 1953, a minority in Pakistan, a Muslim minority, the Ahmadis, the Muslims don't think of them as Muslims. The Ahmadis think of themselves as Muslims. But they are certainly, in Jinnah's cabinet, there was no problem with the Ahmadis. His first foreign minister, in fact, was Sir Zafrullah Khan, who was an Ahmadi. His law minister, who was to be enjoined with the task of constitution making, was a Mr. M.P. Mandal, a Hindu. So Jinnah was as plural and as secular as you can get and as you can think of. So, but the mullahs in the anti-Ahmadiyya, in 1953 there was rioting against the Ahmadis. There was much bloodshed. Lahore was the focal, the city of Lahore was the focal point of that movement. And the city was handed over to the army. Now two deleterious things happened because of that. One, the mullahs resurfaced in a vigorous way. They had succeeded in destabilizing the civil authority. And two, the army, by immediately restoring law and order, gained some credit and gained an image, acquired an image of efficiency, of the ability or an institution that could deliver, which led the army ultimately. I'm leaving out many things like the Constitution of 56, Ayub Khan becoming defense minister, etc., etc., etc. Many other matters, CETO, CENTO, Accords, Pakistan got into it. But it encouraged the army in 1958 to impose martial law throughout the country after elections had been on. The 1958 martial law brought with it a sixth element, anti-democracy element, into full play, and that is the judiciary. Chief Justice Munir validated the military government. Now there is no validation for a military government. There is no excuse for a military government. There is no justification for a military government. Ethical, legal, moral, constitutional, religious. There is never any justification or excuse or validity of a military government. There wasn't and there isn't. But Munir, the Chief Justice, had to give a judgment upholding martial law. It's not a very long judgment, but the sentence that is critical to the judgment is simply this: a successful, the emphasis being on the word successful, a successful coup d'etat is an internationally recognized legal method of changing a government. And thereafter, the judiciary of Pakistan went into bed with the Pakistan army. There were other military coups, 1969, which was accepted by the judges, although there is no one single judgment on accepting it. But Doso's case of 1958 was apparently followed. The 69 coup by Yahya Khan led to the disastrous and gory civil war in East Pakistan, and the bloody military action in East Pakistan ultimately became then Bangladesh. To them, it's their freedom movement. To us, it's a military operation that I think Pakistan and Pakistanis should not be very happy about, should not reflect with great equanimity on it, if not simply be ashamed of it. But it led to the breakup of Pakistan and Bangladesh. In West Pakistan, what remained of Pakistan, Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, the leader of the assembly that belonged to Pakistan, became the President and Prime Minister of the country. I think he was soft on the generals. As I said earlier, his party, I was a junior member of the cabinet in the province of the Punjab under the late Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. But he was soft on the army when they should have been taken to task. Not that the army was soft on him thereafter. When he was removed in a coup on 5th of July 1977, he was hanged after a very suspect trial, and on the basis of a rather spurious indictment, he was hanged in 1979. And 1979, April, the month in which Mr. Bhutto was hanged, he was also incidentally from Oxford. But when he was hanged, that was a low point in Pakistan for the establishment, for all the components that hated democracy, that opposed democracy, because the shining hero of democracy had been assassinated by the feudals, by the armed generals, by the civil bureaucracy, by the mullahs who had taken out a Nizam-e-Mustafa movement against him. So the establishment, when it was by the judiciary who had ruled and had murdered him, it's called judicial murder in Pakistan. So there was, when the establishment was at its lowest ethical, moral, political status, at its very lowest, dishearteningly lowest. Alas, in December 1979, on Boxer's Day, the Soviet tanks moved into Afghanistan. Until that point, Pakistan was dealt with as a pariah by the West, as an untouchable by the West. And the Pakistani establishments and the components were treated as third-class minions and looked upon like that. But with the Soviets moving in, the Soviet Union moving in, its forces in Kabul and taking over Kabul, Kandahar, Ghazni, Herat, Almon, Mazar Sharif, and Jalalabad, the world changed. For us, it changed as profoundly at that time as it did at 9/11. Because suddenly the military general, Ziaul Haq, who was being held responsible and criminally responsible for the murder of democracy, for lashing people, for killing people, for executing an elected prime minister, became the blue-eyed baby of the West, the darling of the West. And this movement spawned such jihadis who at that time were termed as the moral equivalents of the founding fathers of the United States of America. 4 of them who met President Reagan in 1984 in the White House, when Reagan uttered these words, 4 of them today have between them $20 million head money on them, including Sirajuddin Haqqani. Hikmat Yar. They were in the White House in 1984 when those who opposed them at that time, like myself, were spending lonely days and nights in prison cells. These Haqqanis and these Hikmat Yar were feasting at the White House and were defined by none else than the President of the United States as the moral equivalents of the founding fathers of the United States of America. Now, this is the story, the backdrop in which we must look at the lawyers' movement. There is the feudal who is anti-democratic. There is the military man who is anti-democratic, and at that time he rules the roost. The army chief, Musharraf, General Musharraf, is also the president. There is a civil bureaucracy that plays a second fiddle to the army all the time, obeying illegal orders of every manner and every script, including the police. There is the industrialist who is a crony capitalist, and as a crony capitalist has no will to oppose the state from which sanctions his bank loans, which then lubricate his factories and his mills and his income and his lifestyle. And there is the mullah who's gone and who has a compact with the army and the generals. And at this time, the curriculum of Pakistani schools has also been changed. Remember, their period, the most profound disaster that befell upon us was the change of the curriculum. I'll just mention one thing. The history of Pakistan, for instance. The history of Pakistan, and those who are from Pakistan should, I think, take a more serious note of it. And the history of Pakistan. In Pakistan's school textbooks, under the revised Zia syllabus, begins first chapter 1 is Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, which is in Pakistan. And they can't escape it because it is also on the banknote. Its profile, Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, is on the profile of the banknote. Second chapter goes on the history of Pakistan. The second chapter is on pre-Islamic Arabia, Saudi Arabia. Third chapter is the advent of Islam in Saudi Arabia. This is the history of Pakistan. Fourth chapter is the history is the migration of the Holy Prophet from Makkah to Medina, the Hijrat, and the Medinite kingdom, not kingdom, state, Riyasat-e-Medina. The 5th chapter is the Fatah Makkah, the conquest of Mecca. And this is the history of Pakistan. The 6th chapter, or 7th or 8th or whatever, however you divide them, the history of Pakistan then moves to Damascus with the Umayyads. And then returns to Pakistan in 711 AD with Muhammad bin Qasim. Now, in all that period, from Mohenjo-daro to 711 AD, we've cut out the Scythians, we've cut out the Huns, we've cut out the Kushans, we've cut out the Guptas, we've cut out everybody except perhaps the only one Muslim we do give a mention to is Sikandar-e-Azam, Alexander the Great. Now this became our textbook. This deprived us of the inherent and soft pluralism that is Indus society, that is Pakistan's history. So here was a Pakistan in which the middle classes and the lumpen had no voice. They were looking for their heroes. They were oppressed. They were beaten by the police. They were bargained by the bureaucrat. They were overawed by the army officer. They were cheated by the judges. And they had no voice. When on 9th of March 2007, the General Musharraf, the army chief and president, summoned Chief Justice Iftikhar Muhammad Chaudhry to the presidency and sat him down between 5 other uniformed generals and told him to resign. The Chief Justice said no, he would not resign. He was told there was a charge sheet against him, an indictment, and in that indictment there are serious charges he'd have to face if he did not resign. He said, I'll face the charges, but I will not resign. The Chief Justice was instantly arrested while in the presidency, removed to his house and locked up with his children and his wife inside one room of his residence, where he remained for 4 days. In the meantime, to follow up the constitutional formula of the removal of the Chief Justice, because this was obviously an unconstitutional method of removing the Chief Justice, to remove him constitutionally, a session of the Supreme Judicial Council was called, and the Supreme Judicial Council on the 9th of March fixed the 13th of March as the first hearing of this and the trial of the Chief Justice. That is when the Chief Justice came out first after 4 days confinement with his children in one room of his house, and he started walking towards the Supreme Court, which is not too far. His vehicles had been removed, his official vehicles, so he had to walk. He was roughed up by the police on the way, etc. But when he came to the Supreme Court, there was a clutch of about 2,000 lawyers waiting for him, and that began the lawyers' movement. The clutch of lawyers was vigorous, was angry, was outraged, was sloganeering, and they took the Chief Justice, walked with him towards the courtroom. When the Chief Justice, I was just outside the clutch of lawyers, some of our senior lawyers were standing by, when the Chief Justice signaled to me to come close to him, and I dived into the sea of lawyers. It really seemed as if I would be crushed myself. The young lawyers were so enthusiastic. And the Chief Justice asked me to be his attorney in the Supreme Judicial Council. That's how I entered upon a role in the lawyers' movement. In the Supreme Judicial Council, when we went up there, the first thing we were informed, and that there was a limited access, only the 5 judges who comprised the Supreme Judicial Council, plus the registrar of the Supreme Court, plus 5 lawyers from the side of the government, 5 top lawyers from the side of the government, including led by the Attorney General, myself and Shahid Saeed, Sania's brother, were allowed in. First thing we were informed was that it was going to be a camera, hearing in camera. So nothing is going to go out. Second thing we were informed, I was told, was to start defending the Chief Justice there and then. Open your defense, Mr. Ahsan. I said, there is no prosecution. As yet, nothing, prosecution has not spoken. He said, you have read the indictment. It was a page that had been handed over to me there. Now, what is your defense? I said, I plead not guilty. They said, no, you have to argue. I said, I'm not arguing today. You have to give me time to consult my client. I haven't consulted him. They said, we are not going to make it an ordinary civil suit. We have to decide within a couple of days. I said, you are not going to make it an ordinary civil suit. I will not let you become a kangaroo court. They said, everything is in camera. I said, everything is in camera as long as you do justice. I'll allow you to retain it in camera. But if I find you're not doing justice, then I am not bound by your prescription and your order to keep this matter in camera. So we had a regular sparring with the court, because I thought the court was a court of Star Chamber, determined to convict the Chief Justice there and then, because the presiding officer who said, what do you have against me? I said, sir, if the Chief Justice is disqualified, you become the Chief Justice. You better not sit on the bench. But he continued to sit on the bench. So we had to challenge this judgment, this proceeding before the Supreme Court in a writ of certiorari. We went to the Supreme Court directly. I named each one of the members of the Supreme Judicial Council as respondents in my petition to in the Supreme Court, so that none of them could sit on the case in the Supreme Court. And in the Supreme Court, we won, but we won because not only that, I had to argue the case in the Supreme Court, but every Friday, Monday to Friday, I would argue the case in the Supreme Court. Saturday, we would address one or other bar association across the country, and we would drive to the Chief Justice and myself. We decided to drive. We decided the Chief Justice could not have, a Chief Justice has 3 important functions. Any Chief Justice. One is his judicial work. He sits, hears cases, gives judgments. 2, his administrative work, which is different from and above that of every other judge. He is the Chief Justice. He has also to administer the court, to form benches, to determine which cases should go to which benches, etc., to administer the staff of the court. And 3, to maintain good relations between bar and the bench. Now the Chief Justice Iftikhar Muhammad Chaudhry was prevented from doing the first 2. So I suggested to him, I said, the bar and the bench, let's keep you as Chief Justice and let's go and address the bar association. So we started driving to bar associations, and the people began to respond. There was a Tahrir Square every time, a long one Tahrir Square, I can tell you, on the 5th of May, on the 5th of May 2007, the Chief Justice and I drove out of his house at 7:30 a.m. to go to Lahore to attend a bar association function, which was to take place in the evening at 4 p.m. We had started at 7 a.m. thinking that there would be some crowds on the way, and they will be enthusiastic crowds. They'll slow down the vehicle and the convoy, and we would take about 7 hours or 8 hours doing the 150 miles along a 10-lane highway, going through the GT road, going through many towns, but a 10-lane highway, 150 miles. We do maybe in 8 hours, 9 hours. Normally you do it in 4 hours. It took me a continuous, and every inch and every minute of it was covered live, so I can't be exaggerating or lying. Every minute and every inch was covered live. There were so many people. Not a man, not a woman, not a child remained inside their house as the Chief Justice passed their village, passed their house, passed their town, through their town. It took us, these 150 miles took us 26 hours of driving. That also turned the 13 judges, the crowds that were outside. But the lawyers' movement, to come to it specifically and to conclude, the lawyers' movement, and to come to the mischaracterizations which I think are important, and the lawyers' movement shows a mirror to all those who mischaracterize Pakistan. And I think we Pakistanis owe it to us and to Pakistan as well as to our friends in the West to inform them, to educate them. The lawyers' movement is probably the only movement in the Islamic world sustained over 2 long years. 9th March 2007, the Chief Justice was deposed. 22nd March 2009, he was reinstated. Exactly 2 years later, a little more than 2 years later. For 2 years, every Thursday, in every city of Pakistan, there was a Tahrir Square. Every Thursday, in every city of Pakistan, the lawyers protested. They came out of bar rooms. They went to the local town hall or council hall. They marched from the bar room to the town hall. People of the area, political workers, political parties, they all joined. There were large crowds every Thursday for 2 long years. We had a Tahrir Square every Thursday. Sustained over this long period, it would remain utterly, completely, totally non-violent. It was a peaceful and non-violent movement. Not a flower was plucked,